When the void trembled, the stars shimmered with deceptive calm, scattered like shards of crystal across the velvet black of space. In that silence, there was an illusion, an ancient lie the galaxy had told itself for centuries, that the Zvo Dominion was invincible. For 100 systems, the Dominion had ruled through fire and fear. No species had ever stood against them and survived. Their fleets, engineered for overwhelming brutality, swarmed like mechanical locusts, reducing resistance to myth and rebellion to dust. To the Zvo, power was not just an advantage, it was a law of nature. And so when the Terran colony of Kesser Prime refused to yield, no one in the Dominion took it seriously. A single mining world far from the core roots, sparse population, minimal defenses, easy prey. From the bridge of his dreadnought, Acrian Voss Lord General Varen watched the colony spin beneath them like a helpless marble. He lounged upon his throne of coiled steel, clawed fingers, tapping idly against the control arm. His eyes, vertical, cold, ancient, glowed with contempt. "Before their sun sets, this rock will burn," he said, voice like gravel dragged over metal. Officers around him, Alvos, scale-faced and disciplined, nodded without a word. Their orders were clear: commence planetary bombardment. Show these Terrans that defiance was not an act of courage, it was a death sentence. Lock firing sequence on grid sectors 1 through 12. Prepare plasma saturation, barked the weapons officer. But then something rippled at the edge of the void. A distortion, a ripple in space, unnatural, silent. "Sir," the sensor officer's voice cracked slightly. "We've detected a spatial anomaly, system edge." "Ignore it," Varen growled. "Some asteroid wake or gravitational echo. Continue the strike." But the anomaly didn't fade. It sharpened. It tore open. A flash of silver ruptured through space-time, folding itself inside out, and then from the breach they came. The Terran fleet. They did not arrive with fanfare or challenge. They emerged like ghosts, silent, sleek, and utterly focused. Warships black as void steel slid from the rift in tight formation. No glowing hull lights, no extravagant insignias. Only the emblem, a silver ring encircling a burning star. The mark of the United Terran Defense Force. "Human vessels," Varen sneered. "No, this is a bluff. They do not possess the capability." "Sir," the Alvo next to him whispered. "They're locking weapons." The words had barely left his lips before reality shattered. A beam of searing blue energy erupted from the lead Terran cruiser. It wasn't a warning shot, it was a kill. A Zvo destroyer on the outer flank was cleaved in half, its hull shearing like paper, its crew obliterated before they could scream. And then the hunt began. Varen bolted upright. "Ray shields, return fire." Too late. The void exploded into war. Terran frigates dove in formation, fast as lightning, their engines humming with exotic drives the Zvo couldn't identify. Railgun rounds, metal projectiles accelerated to near light, slammed into Zvo cruisers, bypassing energy shielding entirely. Whole ships detonated under kinetic barrages, not even time for distress signals. This wasn't war, it was surgery. Zvo formations built for brute force brawling collapsed under the sheer precision of Terran tactics. Human ships weaved like blades in a storm, coordinated, cold, relentless. From the dreadnought's viewport, Varen watched a dozen of his warships erupt into burning clouds. "This is not possible," he whispered. But it was, and it was only the beginning. He had assumed the humans were still the fractured, primitive species the Dominion had surveyed a century ago. He was wrong. They had been watching, waiting, evolving. And now they had come not to talk, not to protest. They had come to hunt. The hunt begins. From the bridge of the Acrian Voss, the war had become chaos. Lord General Varen gritted his fangs as the tactical display lit up with flashes of red, each one a Zvo vessel going dark. Dozens of his ships, meticulously positioned for a standard orbital bombardment, were now scattering like startled prey. "This makes no sense," he bellowed. "How are they bypassing our shields?" No one had an answer, because the Terrans weren't playing by the rules. They weren't engaging in formation battles, weren't broadcasting commands, weren't posturing like so many lesser species had before. They weren't showing off. They were killing. One by one, Zvo cruisers were hit with high-velocity strikes that tore through armor plating like it was brittle ice. The Dominion had long prided itself on its plasma cannons and electromagnetic shielding, ideal for long, brutal slugfests across light seconds of space. But the Terrans, they had no interest in slugfests. They were deploying what the Dominion had mocked as archaic, solid-mass weapons. Simple hunks of metal hurled at relativistic speeds powered by gravitic launchers. The Zevo shields designed to disperse energy beams were nearly useless. The first human strike had been a scalpel. The second was a hammer. A formation of Terran gunships broke through the left flank, slicing between three Zvo destroyers before the enemy could even adjust trajectory. One destroyer managed to fire a return salvo, wild-panicked plasma bolts, but it was too late. A Terran battleship turned, unleashing a fusillade of hyperkinetic shells that punched through the destroyer's bridge reactors and engine core in less than 3 seconds. It didn't explode. It simply came apart, disassembled mid-flight. On the Acrian Voss, Varen stared speechless. Never in his centuries of command had he witnessed such cold surgical devastation. "Status report," he barked. "Multiple capital ships destroyed, my lord. Defensive grid is..." The officer never finished. A low rumble vibrated through the bridge as another Terran lance struck one of their dreadnoughts. The Jarak Gul, a fortress ship that had once reduced entire planetary defenses to ash in a single campaign, now ruptured in half-hemorrhaging aircrew and molten wreckage into the void. The enemy wasn't just effective, they were relentless. Another voice cracked through the case. "Sir, incoming transmission." "From who?" The bridge went silent for a heartbeat as the transmission cut through even their encrypted lines. A human voice, male, calm, steady. "This is Admiral Elias Rains of the United Terran Defense Force. Zevo fleet, you are outgunned. Withdraw immediately or be reduced to wreckage." The line cut. Silence. Even the hum of the bridge system seemed to fade. No alien species had ever dared speak to the Dominion like that. Not with threats, not with that tone. "How?" Varen started, his voice faltering for the first time in years. "How did they cut into our comms? No one knew." Or do it enter. The Zovo Dominion had invested centuries into building systems resistant to subversion, interference, infiltration. And yet this Terran admiral had pierced through every layer like it was nothing more than paper. Then the human fleet surged forward. It was no longer a battle, it was a slaughter. Varen's ships scrambled to regroup. Desperate orders screamed across comms form. Secondary defensive lines, redirect plasma fire, activate counter-jamming fields. Nothing worked. The Terrans had studied them, had memorized Zvo maneuvers, responses, formation protocols. Each time Varen tried to adapt, the humans had already anticipated his move, cutting off escape vectors, overloading fallback positions, striking weak points in hull composition most species wouldn't even know existed. This wasn't raw power. It was domination through intellect. "We're being hunted," Varen muttered. Even his most hardened officers looked shaken. "Sir," a young Alvo officer said quietly, "we've lost the Darak moon." It went dark instantly. No power surge, no explosion, just gone. The Dominion hadn't even seen the weapon. Varen stared at the screen as one of the last cruisers on the right flank was targeted by a Terran destroyer. A sudden kinetic flash. The Zvo vessel's hull rippled like fluid, then ruptured into shrapnel. He clenched his fists. "They shouldn't be here," he snarled. "They're not supposed to be this effective." But deep down in the coldest part of his battle-hardened mind, he knew the truth. The humans had waited. They had watched. And now they had come not as defenders, but as executioners. "Pull back," he ordered through gritted fangs. "To the second line." Officers obeyed instantly, not out of loyalty, but out of survival. Ships twisted and turned, igniting escape thrusters. Defensive turrets activated. Shield capacitors overloaded, trying to keep pace with the incoming fire. The Terrans did not pause. They accelerated. A wing of Terran frigates dove into the retreating Zvo line like wolves into a panicked herd. They didn't disable targets. They erased them. Varen saw it in their movements, purpose, not instinct. Precision, not panic. Every Terran ship fought like it had something to prove. No, he realized. Not something to prove, something to avenge. "Sir," another officer said, voice barely audible, "they're letting some of our ships escape. There's a corridor intentional." Varen's eyes narrowed. He zoomed in on the tactical display. A narrow opening had formed on the far side of the battlefield. A hyperlane vector, clear, unblocked. "They're not trying to destroy us all," he murmured. "They're letting us go." The bridge went cold. No one spoke. Because that was worse than annihilation. That was a message. You live only because we allow it. The breaking point. The bridge of the Acrian Voss trembled with the aftermath of another impact. Flames licked along the inner bulkhead as systems sparked and dimmed. The air carried the bitter scent of burning circuitry and panic. Lord General Varen stood motionless, claws clenched, jaw rigid. Around him, chaos reigned. Screams echoed from nearby quarters. Officers shouted conflicting orders. Tactical displays flickered with static and red alerts. The Dominion's once proud war machine was unraveling. The center could not hold. "Shields at 14%, barked a tactical aide. "We've lost contact with the Vikar, the Zelmir, and the Torun. Confirmed destroyed." "How many ships do we have left?" Varen demanded. A second of hesitation. "Then less than 30% of the fleet remains, and falling." A silence heavy and final settled on the bridge. Varen stared at the holographic star map before him. Moments ago, it had been a tableau of Control's Vos ships in tight calculated formation surrounding a helpless mining colony. Now it looked like a graveyard. The Terran fleet was still advancing methodically, tearing through stragglers, isolating ships like predators, separating weak prey from the herd. They weren't chasing victory. They were demonstrating dominance. "Pull us back another 20 clicks, Varen ordered. His voice was low, as if uttering the words might shatter something inside him. "Initiate emergency retreat protocols." His second-in-command, Commander Rock, turned to him with disbelief in his slitted eyes. "Sir, you're ordering a withdrawal." Varen didn't answer immediately. He couldn't. The Dominion did not retreat. That doctrine was older than Varen himself, etched into the very fabric of their military legacy. To withdraw was to admit weakness, and weakness was an invitation to be destroyed. But what choice remained? He looked at the battlefield again. There was no battle, only execution. He had brought the Dominion's most elite armada, and it was being butchered. Every countermeasure failed. Every tactic predicted. The enemy wasn't just winning, they were toying with them. "No," Varen finally growled, his voice fraying. "We're not retreating. We're repositioning." The bridge crew exchanged quiet, uncertain glances. They knew, everyone did. This was defeat. And not just any defeat, this was a humiliation. At the rear of the formation, the surviving Zevo vessels began pulling away, scarred cruisers venting plasma dreadnoughts, limping along with damaged engines. Some ships barely moved, drifting like gutted whales through space. Yet the Terran fleet didn't pursue. They held their line, hovering above Kesser Prime, the colony they had come to defend, motionless, watching, as if daring the Dominion to come back. "They're not even finishing us off," Commander Rock muttered. "No," Varen said, his voice hollow. "They want us to live, to carry the story back, so the entire galaxy hears what happened here." The words left a bitter taste in his mouth. He remembered the way Rains spoke, measured, confident. No arrogance, no rage, just certainty. That was what truly terrified Varen. Not just the firepower, not the stealth systems, not the kinetic weaponry, but the calm. The humans knew they had won before they fired a second shot. They didn't just outgun the Dominion. They outthought them. "Incoming transmission," the comms officer shouted. "Another from the Terran flagship." Varen's eyes narrowed. "Put it through." The voice of Admiral Elias Rains filled the bridge again. "Last chance, Zvo fleet. Depart the system. Do not return, or next time we won't stop at your ships." The line ended. No threat, no rage. Just finality. Rock turned to Varen. "Sir, we should go. Our long-range reinforcements are hours away, and we are..." "Not finished," Varen snapped. But his voice lacked conviction. Even he could hear it. He stared at the crew, at the fear in their eyes, something he had never seen among Dominion officers. Not like this. And not just fear of the enemy. They feared him now too. They feared he would choose pride over survival. His claws dug into the armrest of his throne. Metal groaned beneath the pressure. But there was no glory in dying here. Not like this. Not hunted. Not humiliated. He slammed his fist down. "All remaining ships? Withdraw." The word rang out across the bridge like a thunderclap. Shock followed. Then slowly crew members began relaying the command. Signals were dispatched to what remained of the Dominion fleet. Engines roared to life as ships turned toward the hyperlane corridor, the very path the humans had intentionally left open. It was a scar, a wound they had been allowed to flee through, not because they fought well, but because the Terrans let them. Varen watched the tactical display as the last of his vessels slipped into hyperspace. Not a single Terran ship fired. Not one pursued. They simply watched, like lions sparing a fleeing gazelle. Minutes passed in silence. The Acrian Voss coasted through the void, limping from the battlefield, sensors flickering. No one spoke. There was nothing to say. The bridge was heavy with something deeper than defeat, heavier than death. It was shame. Varen sat in his command throne, unmoving, his eyes fixed on the stars. The Dominion had never lost a battle like this, never been dismantled so thoroughly, never been allowed to escape out of pity. And now every being on this ship, every soldier, every officer, knew what the rest of the galaxy would learn soon. The Zvo Dominion had been broken. Ashes and silence. The stars drifted by like silent judges as the battered remnants of the Zvo fleet limped away from Kessler Prime. Inside the command deck of the Acreon Voss, silence reigned, not the tactical kind, nor the disciplined focus of a well-trained crew. No, this silence was heavier. It carried shame. It clung to the walls, soaked into the breath of every officer like smoke from a fire they had failed to control. For the first time in generations, a Zvo Dominion war campaign had ended in retreat. Not strategic withdrawal, not redeployment, defeat. And worst of all, the enemy hadn't pursued. They had watched, held position over the colony like gods of war, daring the Dominion to return. Varen sat in his throne, the once imposing symbol of command, now feeling like a cage. The tactical map before him replayed the battle frame by frame. Every loss, every maneuver countered, every Zvo warship turned to drifting wreckage. He didn't blink. He forced himself to see it all. "Play it again," he growled. Commander Rock stood a few paces behind him, jaw tight. "Sir, we've run the logs 3 times already. There's nothing new to play it again." The holomap rewound, then burst back to life. He watched as the Terran fleet emerged from slipspace, perfect formation, 0 delay, no comm lag. He watched as the Jarek Ghoul, his most heavily armored cruiser, was impaled by a kinetic lance that no Dominion ship had ever accounted for in their shielding equations. He watched the humans move like a pack of wolves, isolating the weakest ships, hammering them without hesitation. No mercy, no waste, no fear. That's the part that haunts me, Varen thought. They never hesitated. He leaned forward, elbows on knees, claws tapping the edge of the chair. His golden armor was scorched and cracked one shoulder piece, missing a corner from the blast that had rocked the bridge earlier. He hadn't moved to fix it. There was nothing ceremonial about what had just happened. A chime rang at the door to his quarters. He didn't speak, but it opened anyway. Rock entered, holding a datapad. His scales had dulled from the smoke and blood of the battle, and his eyes looked older somehow. "They're requesting a full report, my lord," he said. Varen didn't look up. "I expected as much," he murmured. "They want specifics, casualty figures, weapon logs, enemy analysis." Of course they did. High Command would be foaming at the maw, expecting word of a conquered colony and another step in Dominion expansion. Instead, they would learn that Kessler Prime still stood, and the Dominion's most elite fleet had been spared like insects. "No word of this leaves this ship," Varen said quietly. Rock blinked. "Sir." Varen rose finally. He towered over the console, eyes glowing with cold fury. "Not until I decide what they hear. Not until I know how to avenge this." There was silence, then a grim nod from his second. "A partial report," then Rock offered, "stripped of all references to human superiority. Make it sound like unexpected resistance, an ambush, minimal survivors. Do not name the enemy. And if they ask who it was, they'll find out soon enough," Varen said. "But not from me. Not yet." Later in his private chamber, he stared out the viewport. The wreckage of what had once been his pride, the Zelmir, the Dark Moon, dozens of destroyers and gunships floated somewhere far behind them. Now tiny points of glowing debris scattered across the void. Each one a tomb. He didn't grieve for them. He was Zvo. Grief was weakness. But what burned inside him now wasn't rage, it was something colder. Calculation. They had underestimated the humans. No worse, they had ignored them. The Dominion had spent decades dismissing them as a fledgling species, fragmented, petty, backward. But the humans had done something no other race had managed. They had learned, and they had struck not with chaos but with precision. A chime sounded again. He didn't speak. The door opened. Rock entered again, this time with a different tone. "I've compiled what we have from intercepted data. Ship classes, energy signatures, kinetic patterns. You'll want to see this." He placed a tablet on the desk. Varen swiped through it. The information was fragmented but undeniable. Terran ship designs had evolved rapidly over the last 2 decades, faster than any known civilization. They had focused not on expanding territory, but on perfecting weapons. They didn't match the Dominion in fleet size. Not yet, but what they lacked in numbers, they more than compensated for in adaptability. "They fight to survive," Rock said quietly, "and that makes them dangerous." Varen didn't respond. He was already forming the next step. He would not return to High Command with his tail between his legs. Not to grovel, not to excuse failure. No, he would return with a new doctrine, a new kind of war. Back on the bridge, the few surviving officers stood quietly, their uniforms singed, their eyes hollow. When Varen entered again, they straightened not out of discipline, but because the air changed when he walked in. He wasn't defeated. He was calculating. "We return to Zvo Prime," he said. No further transmissions, no signals, no reports. This disgrace is ours alone, for now. And after Rock asked, Varen turned toward the viewport one last time. Far behind them, Kesser Prime shimmered beneath the orbit of Terran warships. After he whispered, "We learn, we adapt, we evolve. And next time, we don't just fight the humans. We break them." Fear in the shadows. The War Council chamber of Zvo Prime was a place built to intimidate. Carved from black obsidian and veined with glowing crimson, the towering spires of the hall stretched into darkness above. The scent of scorched metal and ritual incense clung to every inch of air. No words were whispered here, only decrees carved in blood and flame. Only dominance spoke. Lord General Varen strode into the chamber with his cloak trailing like the shadow of a falling star. Behind him followed Commander Rock and two of his most loyal aides. The blast scars on his armor hadn't been polished. He wore them like proof. The chamber was shaped like a crescent coliseum with the highest echelons of the Dominion's military caste seated along its curve. The High Lords of War, ancient and battle-scarred, sat in silence as Varen approached. Above them loomed the throne of Supreme Warlord Jarek, the most powerful military figure in the known Zvo hierarchy. His golden eyes pierced through the dim light, unreadable. The room was silent. The holoscreen in the center of the chamber flickered to life, playing unfiltered footage of the Kesser Prime disaster frame by agonizing frame. Ships exploding, crew screaming, the Jarek ghoul being sliced in two like meat on a butcher's slab. And finally, the image of the Terran fleet, motionless above the planet like predators standing over a carcass they'd chosen not to eat. When it ended, Jarek leaned forward slowly. His voice was soft, but it rang through the room like a blade sliding from its sheath. "Explain this disgrace." Varen did not kneel. He was no supplicant. He met the Supreme Warlord's gaze without flinching. "We were unprepared," he said evenly. "The humans are not what we believe them to be." A murmur rippled through the War Council. "Humans," one of the High Lords sneered Kraos, a brutish veteran with plasma scars across his jaw. "You expect us to believe this was done by a backwater race of soft-fleshed mammals?" Varen didn't look at him. He looked at Jarek. "They are more advanced than we anticipated, more dangerous." Kraos barked a harsh laugh. "Dangerous? They should be pets. You lost because you were careless." "No," Varen snapped. "We lost because they studied us, planned for us, and then they hunted us like it was their home turf." Jarek tilted his head. "You speak as if they are our equals," he said. Varen's eyes narrowed. "Worse. They're not interested in conquest. They fight to survive, and that makes them capable of things we are not prepared for." The chamber fell quiet again. That statement, it challenged everything. The Zvo Dominion had ruled by brute force for centuries. No diplomacy, no attrition, only extermination. To suggest there was a species immune to fear, capable of adaptation faster than the Dominion's brutality could suppress, that was heresy. Jarek leaned back, fingers tapping slowly on his armrest. "Then tell me, Lord General," he said, his voice ice, "if they were so dangerous, why did they let you live?" That question struck like a blade to the gut. Varen didn't flinch. "Because they wanted us to carry a message back. They want us to know they could have annihilated us. And they want us to fear them." A low, angry hiss escaped from Kraos' maw. "Arrogant vermin," he spat. "If they wish to be feared, then let us give them reason." Varen raised a hand, stopping him. "We don't strike back in the open. That's what they expect. They've prepared for it. They'll win that fight again." Gasps and scoffs echoed across the chamber. Jarek's gaze sharpened. "Then what do you suggest?" Varen stepped forward into the center of the room. The light caught the cracks in his armor, the bloodstains that hadn't been cleaned. He looked like a commander who had been humbled, but not broken. "We stop fighting like conquerors." A pause, sharp silence. "And start fighting like predators." Now he had their attention. "We abandon glory. We abandon honor. We abandon everything they expect us to cling to. We strike from the shadows. We bleed their supply lines, their colonies, their civilians. We make them afraid to close their eyes. We make their people scream." Kraos' lip curled in disgust. "You propose we abandon battlefield combat for terrorism." "I propose we win," Varen snapped. "There is no cowardice in survival and no dishonor in victory. They believe they understand war. Let us show them what it looks like when war comes with no warning, no rules, no mercy." The chamber trembled with quiet fury. Some of the older warlords looked away shaken. Others leaned forward, eyes gleaming with a dark hunger. "And Jarek," he smiled. "Very well," he said. "You will have what you need. Build your force, choose your targets, and teach these humans what it means to challenge the Dominion." Back aboard the Acrian Voss, Varen stood before a new holographic map. This one covered in civilian targets, fueling depots, communication nexuses, and unguarded transit points across Terran space. Commander Rock stood beside him. "First target," Rock asked. Varen's claws tapped the edge of the console. "Epsilon Eridani Logistics Hub," he said coldly. "Lightly defended, civilian, vulnerable." Rock hesitated. "There will be thousands of non-combatants." "Good," Varen said. "Let the humans learn. Their fleets might be superior, but their compassion is their weakness." Terror unleashed. The Vassus was not like other Dominion warships. It was smaller, faster, sleeker. Its hull was layered with refractive alloys and heat-dampening skins, rendering it nearly invisible to long-range scanners. Its power signature was a whisper, its weapons gravitic coils, precision, kinetic railguns. EMP spears were designed not to overwhelm, but to silence. This was not a warship made for glory. It was made to hunt. Lord General Varen stood on the command deck, his eyes fixed on the holographic display of human-controlled space. Red icons glowed across the void: supply depots, relay stations, fueling platforms, transport hubs, targets. And in the center of the display blinked the first one, Epsilon Eridani Logistics Hub. Rock stood beside him, posture rigid. Civilian population in the thousands. Minimal defense fleet, a few orbital destroyers and one outdated cruiser. Varen didn't blink. "They won't see us coming." And they didn't. The Vassus and 5 other ships, each a ghost in the void, slipped through human patrol lines unnoticed. No flares, no drive trails. Only a whisper of data across long-range sensors easily dismissed as space static. Epsilon Eridani spun quietly below them. A sprawling logistics station orbited above the colony, a city in space home to fuel silos, medical bays, warehouses, repair docks, and families. Thousands of workers, engineers, technicians, children, and no one expected war. The humans had always drawn a line between soldiers and civilians. Even now, as the war with the Dominion escalated, they believed some places were sacred. They were wrong. "Initiate blackout," Varen ordered. The first move wasn't fire. It was silence. An electromagnetic spear erupted from the Vassus, invisible and instantaneous. It pierced through the relay satellites, fried comm arrays, shattered sensor grids. Within seconds, Epsilon Eridani went dark. On board, the station alarms screamed, but there was no warning, no clear threat. Systems failed, lights died, communications cut, power stuttered, oxygen scrubbers hiccuped. And then the attack began. A second volley, kinetic rounds the size of cargo containers, slammed into the central ring of the logistics hub. The core ruptured, entire sectors vented atmosphere. Workers were pulled screaming into the void. No one even had time to call for help. The humans had protocols, emergency drills, evacuation corridors. But none of that mattered when the corridors no longer existed. Escape pods launched in panic, only to be intercepted and destroyed mid-flight by Dominion strike craft that had already flanked the station. In less than 3 minutes, the outer sectors were reduced to debris. On the bridge of the Vassus, Commander Rock gave a sharp nod. All escape vectors neutralized. Civilian traffic eliminated. Internal fires spreading. "Proceed with secondary phase," Varen replied. Fighter squadrons launched not to fight but to terrorize. They flew low passes across the civilian decks, discharging sonic bursts that shattered glass, ruptured eardrums, and sent terrified families scrambling through smoke-filled corridors. Precision rail shots punctured fuel tanks, igniting sections of the station into miniature suns. There was no resistance. There was no time. It wasn't battle. It was butchery. Somewhere deep in the burning station, a human voice finally broke through on a backup frequency. "This is Epsilon Eridani Logistics. We are under attack. Repeat. Dominion vessels." The signal ended in static as the comm tower collapsed in on itself, consumed by flame and pressure. Back aboard the Vassus, Varen watched without expression. "Status. All targets neutralized," Rock confirmed. "There are no survivors." Varen nodded once. "Withdraw. Now." With silent efficiency, the Dominion fleet faded back into the void, disappearing as swiftly as it had arrived. They left no prisoners, no messages, only a wound. Hours later, across human space, the footage began to spread. Leaked security logs, fragments of audio, images of fire consuming homes, shuttles torn apart as they fled, civilians burned in their quarters, children screaming as bulkheads exploded, entire families lost without warning. The United Terran Defense Force scrambled to respond, but there was nothing to save. Only ash. Admiral Elias Rains stood in the war room on Earth, face pale with fury. The holoscreen showed what little data had survived: static-filled cries, sensor blackout patterns, gravitational anomalies. His fists clenched. No military targets, a technician whispered. No command staff, no warships, just people. They had never seen the Dominion strike like this before. Not like warriors, but like monsters. Why, one young officer asked aloud, voice shaking, why hit a logistics hub full of non-combatants? Rains turned to her, voice ice. Because we made them afraid, and now they're showing us what fear looks like. The next morning, across every human news outlet, the message was clear. Epsilon Eridani is gone, and for the first time in the war, civilians began to ask the question humanity had long avoided. Are we safe anywhere? But Rains had already made his decision. In the cold silence of the fleet command bunker, he stood before his generals and said just 6 words. No more waiting, no more mercy. The time for defense was over. Humanity was done drawing lines. Now they would cross them all. Humanity unleashed. The flames of Epsilon Eridani had barely cooled when Earth made its decision. There was no vote, no deliberation, no debate in the Senate chambers or councils of ethics. The footage was enough. And in that burning silence, something ancient stirred. Not vengeance, something older. Instinct. At United Terran Defense Command, Admiral Elias Rains stood before the assembled brass under the cold glow of orbital lights. Behind him, a holo display showed what remained of Epsilon Eridani, a spinning debris field scattered across a planetary orbit with 0 life signs. Thousands dead, he said. No warning, no resistance, no logic. He paused, then turned slowly to face them. The Dominion thinks we'll falter, that we'll mourn, that we'll restrain ourselves. His voice dropped like a hammer. They forgot what we are. Across the solar system, order turned to motion. Mars activated dormant factories buried under the red soil engines of war long shuttered after the Treaty of Phobos. Luna shipyards powered up their orbital rings, bringing a dozen new battlecruisers out of cold storage. Titan, long thought a scientific hub, revealed deep-core missile silos capable of launching FTL-piercing payloads. The United Terran Defense Force, once cautious, once held back by law funding, and politics, was now unchained. Mobilize all fleets, Rains ordered. Activate the Minerva Protocol. Gasps rippled through the room. The Minerva Protocol hadn't been invoked since the Ort insurrection, a last resort policy designed to bring every military, civilian, and industrial branch under wartime alignment. It meant everything was now a weapon. The call echoed through the colonies. No more mercy, no more lines. We go to war, and humanity answered. Workers volunteered for ship duty in droves. Technicians pulled double shifts welding the bones of destroyers together. Engineers rewrote targeting software overnight, adding predictive AI that could track Dominion stealth movement. Scientists cracked open forbidden archives, experimental tech once deemed too dangerous. Even civilians joined the fight. They didn't do it because they were told to. They did it because Epsilon Eridani had made something terrifyingly clear. The Dominion wasn't just trying to win, they were trying to erase them. At Era's Fleet Command, Admiral Rains stood aboard the flagship TNS Resolute as the massive Terran armada formed behind him. Over 300 warships, 7 dreadnoughts, carriers, frigates, stealth cruisers, support platforms, AI-guided drones. It was the largest human fleet assembled since the Europa campaign. And it was just the first wave. He turned to his communications officer. Send the message. The transmission was brief. It wasn't a warning. It was a declaration. To the Zvo Dominions, you struck the heart of our people. You killed civilians, children, scientists, refugees, and you thought we would break. You were wrong. We are not here to survive anymore. We are here to end you. On the other side of the stars, in the war towers of the Dominion, the message was received in silence. Lord General Varen watched it 3 times. No threat, no boast, no scream, just certainty. He felt something tighten in his chest, a feeling he hadn't known since his first days in command. Not anger, dread. The Terran Armada didn't wait. Within hours, they struck. Not at Zvo fleets, but at what the Dominion never thought anyone would dare touch: their fuel chains. Logistics, rings, subspace gates, communications nodes. Terran stealth ships disabled hyperlane beacons, causing Dominion vessels to emerge light years off course into asteroid fields or black hole proximity. Saboteurs, human operatives trained in AI-simulated Dominion culture, infiltrated space stations, introduced virus protocols into central control systems, and detonated reactors from within. On the world of Thalorfaith, a Dominion refinery hub, orbital defenses failed in less than 6 minutes. Terran bombardments targeted not population centers, but power cores, relay towers, fleet fuel depots. When Dominion reinforcements arrived, the planet was already dead, but not in fire, in silence. The Dominion had always known how to kill, but the humans, they had learned how to cripple. And worse, they made it look easy. In briefing rooms across human space, the word vengeance was never spoken aloud. They didn't need to say it, because now everything humanity did said one thing: you shouldn't have touched our people. On Earth's streets, once filled with protest signs and diplomatic rallies, now held unity marches. The faces of the dead from Epsilon Eridani were projected across buildings not as victims, but as reasons. Children raised money for ship armor. Artists painted Terran warships like angels of fury. Engineers submitted weapon schematics not for profit, but for pride. This wasn't nationalism. This wasn't rage. This was something deeper. A species that had just remembered who they were. A species that had survived extinction-level events, infighting disease, climate collapse, and still clawed their way to the stars. And now someone had made the mistake of thinking they were still soft. Rains watched the fleet line up in orbital formation shields, humming cannons charging. He didn't smile. He didn't shout. He just said one word: advance. The war has changed. The halls of the Dominion Central Command were no longer filled with the cold confidence of supremacy. Now they echoed with uncertainty. Reports flooded in from across the Outer Rim gateways, destroyed fuel depots, incinerated command stations sabotaged. High-value Zevo worlds had gone dark, not conquered, but rendered useless, drained of logistics, bleeding resources, stripped of command cohesion. It wasn't just the humans' warships anymore. It was everything. The air, the shadows, even time. Lord General Varen stood before a massive star map, watching the red markers, his worlds turn black one by one. "They don't fight like us," he muttered. Rock, standing nearby, answered quietly, "because they've stopped fighting for territory." He looked up at his commander. "They're fighting to make sure we can never stand again." At first, Dominion High Command had called it a temporary setback. They had blamed Varen's cowardice, claimed the loss at Caesar Prime was an anomaly. But that illusion had cracked the moment the Terran retaliation began. And now even the Supreme Warlord Jarek sat in silence. In a private war chamber buried beneath layers of obsidian and steel, Varen addressed the inner circle once more. This time the room was colder. The arrogance had been replaced with calculation and something none of them dared say aloud: fear. "They dismantle faster than we rebuild," Varen stated. "They don't hold ground. They burn what matters and vanish. They've made the rules irrelevant." Kraos, the once boisterous High Lord, remained silent, his gaze unfocused. "They don't seek conquest," Rock added. "Only your end." "Then we end them first," growled Jarek. But even his voice lacked weight. Varen approached the holomap and magnified a cluster of Terran-controlled space. "We tried to show them fear," he said, "and instead they remembered who they are." He looked around the room, claws clenched behind his back. "We thought they were fractured, weak, that their compassion made them soft. But we were wrong. It made them furious." On the edge of Dominion space, the human fleet struck again. This time not with bombs or missiles, but with a whisper. A message carried across subspace broadcast into every Zevo system simultaneously. It was short: "We are not your prey. We are your reckoning." And then came the ships. Hundreds of them. Silent, black, unmarked save for that silver ring and burning star. They didn't come for battlefields. They came for symbols. The throne station above Zevo Prime's second moon obliterated in 10 minutes. The First Fleet Arsenal vault breached from within by infiltrators who detonated all reserves before fleeing. On the world of Vashtar, once considered untouchable, Terran forces hijacked the planetary AI and played back the screams from Epsilon Eridani on every civilian channel just before the power grid was incinerated from orbit. They weren't just retaliating. They were breaking the myth of Dominion invincibility piece by piece. Lord General Varen stood aboard the Vassus, watching the data scroll across his display. The numbers meant nothing anymore. Not when the strategy had collapsed. Not when every rule he'd trained under had become obsolete. "They fight like they've already buried us," he muttered. Rock exhaled slowly, because in their minds they already have. A long pause. Then Varen said it aloud. "This is no longer a war between species. This is extinction-level warfare." At the core of Terran Command, Admiral Rain stood before a new fleet larger than the last. He wore no medals, no ceremonial ribbons, only black armor etched with the symbol of Earth's fallen. Behind him, the names of the dead scrolled endlessly. Epsilon Eridani Thalor 5, Victus Station. He turned to his officers, voice calm. "They tried to make us afraid. They tried to make us hesitate. So now we remove the need for fear entirely." He pointed to the map where the Dominion's capital blinked like a prize waiting to be claimed. "We don't stop until their empire is dust." And he meant it. The Minerva Protocol had gone beyond military alignment. Now every aspect of human society was at war. Artists designed propaganda that shattered Dominion morale. Engineers developed vacuum-adapted soldiers bred for stealth strikes on asteroid facilities. Bi-war constructs, once shelved for being too inhuman, were activated. Silent reapers that needed no sleep, no food, no emotion. The Dominion tried to retaliate. They sent fleets, dozens of them. But every time the humans were waiting, somehow always 2 steps ahead. One Dominion warlord screamed treason, another claimed prophecy. Varen knew the truth. They've cracked our systems, he told Yurik. They don't guess, they know, because they've stopped being predictable. And that more than anything else was the difference now. The humans had gone from warriors to something else entirely. Adaptable, unmerciful, unrelenting. Yurik sat back in his throne claws drumming. The glow in his eyes had dimmed. Then what do you propose, he asked Varen. The Lord General stepped forward. His voice was cold steel. We abandon what we are. We become like them. But even he knew it was too late. The war had already changed. Not just tactics, not just weapons, but everything. The galaxy wasn't watching the fall of the Dominion anymore. It was watching the rise of something far more terrifying. A united humanity with nothing left to lose. And